Hello, and welcome to the City of Decatur's weekly update. The latest numbers from the Macon County Health Department show that while we continue to have additional positive COVID-19 cases, as a percentage of the total tested, we have flattened the curve and it is starting, slowly, to move downward in this region. But in the face of significant virus spikes elsewhere in the country, we need to remain vigilant about safety and public health protections as we move closer to Phase 4 of Restore Illinois, scheduled to occur on Friday, June 26th, just over a week from now. On behalf of the Mayor and City Council, thank you. Thank you one and all for everything you have done, from maintaining social distancing, wearing masks where they're needed, employing extra cleaning procedures, and using screening protocols to keep Decatur safe. These efforts will still be needed as we move into Phase 4, but many of those restrictions will ease. They'll ease on indoor dining, on public meetings, and several other gatherings. But we will not be back to the way that it was in pre-pandemic times. We still will have some rules. They'll just be much less restrictive than the ones that were in place during Phase 3. But please note this caution. Health experts believe that the greatest risk for spreading and contracting the disease is at large gatherings and public assemblies. Despite the pandemic, please know that the business of your city government continues. So I'd like to take a few minutes to update you on 3 topics recently in the news. Number 1, fire department staffing and inspections. Number 2, ongoing demolition of derelict residential structures in the city. And number 3, the City of Decatur's changing financial condition. First, with regard to the fire department, let me say right away that scurrilous and goofy rumors on social media about fires being set to stress the city's in-transition inspections and investigations apparatus, or crazy allegations that firefighters conspired to retire in a cluster are all complete nonsense. No one in my office or on the City Council doubts the complete dedication, the sincerity, and the public service ethic of all the men and women who serve in our fire department. We greatly appreciate that our Decatur firefighters are quietly and reliably there for all of Decatur in every hour of need. I must say, however, that my words of praise, genuinely, are for the men and women of the fire department, but I have to say that they don't necessarily extend to the Chicago-based union that represents most of our fire department staff, because I think that they may have created a false narrative in the public regarding ongoing changes we are making to provide inspection, investigation, and fire prevention services. So let me set the record straight. Last fall, I learned that 3 captain-level inspectors in the fire department would all retire at the same time last month in May. This was the entire staff of the Inspection Bureau. They were not first responders. This bureau costs the taxpayers of Decatur more than $500,000 a year in wages, insurance, pensions, other benefits, and operational costs. I believed then, as now, that we can provide all of these services to the citizens of Decatur for substantially less money by simply restructuring and reallocating those duties differently. This simultaneous cluster of retirements in the Inspection Bureau gave the City of Decatur a unique opportunity to implement some changes and achieve significant economies without displacing or laying off any employees. So when collective bargaining for a new labor contract for the fire department began in January, the city notified the union of our intent to restructure these services. I don't believe the city is obligated to bargain over whether we make this change, but I was pleased to bargain over the different options of how the services could be restructured. In fact, many other Illinois fire departments have employed these same different ways, providing these inspection, investigation, and fire prevention services, all to save the taxpayers money. But the Chicago-based fire union has steadfastly insisted that the city must restore the old, less efficient way of providing fire inspection, fire investigation, and fire prevention services, even in the face of pandemic cutbacks. The false narrative that they and others may have created is that these services have not been provided at all since those May retirements. This is not true. We are simply finding ways to do it differently. The city has created a temporary method for providing inspections and investigations and fire prevention and related support services using our existing fire staff, our existing community development staff, and possibly some outsourcing, until the time that the city completes a negotiated settlement with the union. Now, compounding this transition, 2 months prior to these three captains' retirements, the city was hit with the COVID pandemic. In the face of multi-million-dollar shortfalls in our city budget, the City Council nevertheless determined to reduce personnel costs only through attrition and natural turnover rather than any forced layoffs or involuntary furloughs. Though the City Council cannot guarantee we will continue to follow this course, I remain very hopeful that we can make enough budget reductions through normal attrition and other cost reductions to keep everyone on the job. So I find the Chicago-based union's demand that we fully restore the former Bureau rather tone-deaf. Tone-deaf to the city's genuine desire to save tax dollars and reduce rising pension costs by restructuring and realigning the way we provide services. Tone-deaf to the current economic crisis that Decatur faces and the city's commitment, genuine commitment to its employees to retain existing jobs by saving money by simply not replacing voluntary staff departures and retirements. And tone-deaf to the city's real desire to work with the union to develop a less expensive alternative service model. You know, in this era with all the challenges we face, every local government and every department of city government must evolve and remake itself from time to time to adapt to these changing conditions, to reduced funding and to new service demands. And the city stands ready to have that conversation with its Chicago-based fire union. So I hope this corrects any inaccuracies that you may have heard on that subject. Second topic. At its last meeting, the City Council authorized the demolition of several derelict and abandoned homes and declared another 44 residential structures unsafe so that we can move to the next step in the condemnation and demolition process. These actions are part and parcel of an ongoing, year-long plus initiative by staff and the City Council to increase removal of derelict structures, increase code enforcement against abandoned properties, and gradually improve the appearance of some of our urban core neighborhoods. While we need to remove more, I think the extent of derelict structures may have been overstated recently. Yes, several neighborhoods have derelict and unlivable structures, but they also have many structures that are simply vacant and need to be returned to productive use. And there are also many substandard rental structures. Neighborhood revitalization does not begin and end with demolition of derelict structures, though this is one strategy that we use. Although we have to do more, I am pleased that our staff has increased the rate of demolitions and of code enforcement. Now, generally speaking, the distressed buildings in Decatur fall into one of four groups. Number one, derelict and abandoned, unlivable structures. Number two, vacant and foreclosed properties, but ones that are not derelict. Number three, substandard structures actively used as rental properties. And number four, substandard owner-occupied homes. To the extent we can intervene and stop the building deterioration in these last three categories I mentioned, we can reduce the number of structures that would eventually require demolition. With additional outside resources from the state and from the Buffett Foundation, we have stepped up demolitions, and the city has increased access to funding programs to help low and moderate income persons fix up owner-occupied homes. But those other two categories, vacant and foreclosed, and substandard rentals, need to be directly dealt with. Otherwise, many of those structures will be headed, sooner or later, to the demolition list. And demolition is the most expensive strategy and arguably the most disruptive one to the livability fabric of our older neighborhoods. That is why the City Council is currently considering a vacant and foreclosed registration ordinance, and why, later this year, the city will begin consideration of an ordinance to require limited inspections of rental structures where there has been a history of code violations. If we do not do these things, along with demolition, revitalization, I fear, will languish, and that will end up hurting the most vulnerable among our population, and will just end up stacking up longer and more expensive demolition lists. Other cities that are engaged in neighborhood revitalization like we are have discovered the same thing, that all of these strategies addressing all these different aspects of structures in older neighborhoods are required simultaneously to turn around our neighborhoods. Demolition alone is not the answer. I hope this gives a little more focus and detail to the city's revitalization process. Finally, our budget. All of the city's efforts face greater challenges now as a result of multi-million-dollar budget shortfalls caused by pandemic-related economic disruptions. Your city leaders assess and update our financial projections regularly, and we are pursuing a strategy of curtailing and reducing costs to get through rather than increasing taxes whenever possible. Our budget projections assume no future bailouts from Congress, although we have been successful at landing several COVID and CARES-related grants. The City Council is committed to living within its means, but to do so, we must be willing to think differently. Think differently about how services are provided, how they're staffed, and how we can eliminate needless duplication of effort that has historically occurred because there are simply too many overlapping taxing districts providing allied services. You know, despite the 2020 disruptions we are all living through, the City Council and I remain very optimistic that by creatively working together, we can all make Decatur leaner and better. I look forward to sharing with you again next week.